My name is Elena Carter. I'm 31, the youngest in the family, and I came to the will reading with no expectations. Still, I hoped for once they might see me. They didn't. Mom told me, "Just sit in the back and don't interrupt." But there was something in the lawyer's hand they hadn't seen yet. They laughed when they called my name. It wasn't loud, not the kind of laugh that echoes or shakes a room, but the kind that travels under breath sharp like glass in velvet. I was sitting at the far end of the mahogany table, just close enough to see the expressions, but far enough for them to pretend I wasn't there. My name wasn't even fully said. Just the extra. As if I were a misplaced napkin. Aunt Linda chuckled into her teacup. Melissa didn't even look up from her phone. Mom Karen just pressed her lips together like she always did when something impolite amused her. I didn't say anything, just folded my hands in my lap and kept my gaze on the china plate in front of me. It still had the faint imprint of the last cookie someone took. Lemon, I think. It was a cold Tuesday. Cloudy, the kind that makes even the birds second-guess their songs. The reading of the will was scheduled right after the wake, which meant most people were still in stiff black clothes, smelling faintly of lilies and polished wood. The room had too many mirrors and not enough warmth. Grandpa's portrait hung crooked on the wall behind the lawyer. No one fixed it. I noticed. Before the lawyer started, someone passed around biscotti. Melissa took two. I wasn't offered one. Neither was Zach, my cousin on Dad's side, who'd flown in from Oregon. He gave me a quiet nod when we locked eyes, one of the only ones who had. I had come because Grandpa had written me a letter, a simple one folded neatly in an envelope with just my name on it, Emily. Not M, not E, not the youngest, just Emily. I hadn't told anyone about it. There was no need. I remembered the last time we spoke. It wasn't long, just 10 minutes in the hallway after Mom had scolded me for leaving the dishwasher open. Grandpa had slipped me a butterscotch and said, "Some rooms weren't built for you to fit in, Emily. Build your own room." And now here I was, sitting in a room I didn't fit in. The lawyer, Mr. Henry Lowell, cleared his throat. Everyone settled in. He wore a navy blue tie and round glasses, and his voice was the kind that didn't demand attention but received it anyway. Let's begin. There was a list. Of course there was. A parade of names and items, watches, land deeds, paintings, old stocks, antique furniture. It all went as expected. Melissa received the sapphire ring. Mom got the lake house. Someone got Grandpa's coin collection. My name hadn't come up. And to Emily Carter, the lawyer said the remainder. That was when Aunt Linda laughed. The extra, she muttered. Someone near her giggled. The sound was small but sharp. It didn't echo, but I felt it. I didn't look up. I didn't ask what the remainder meant. I didn't write anything down, just listened. The air felt different then, like it paused. Mr. Lowell didn't look at me. Not yet. He simply turned the page and continued. Melissa leaned toward Mom and whispered something. Mom nodded, almost smug. I didn't react. I tucked a loose strand of hair behind my ear and straightened my posture. In moments like that, silence says more than defense. I remembered something Grandpa once said when I was 13 and had come home crying after a classmate called me the weird one. He'd told me, let them laugh. That's how they test if your roots hold. So I let them. Let them snicker. Let them misinterpret. Let them think the remainder meant scraps. I knew better, or at least I hoped I did. The rest of the will continued like a train on old tracks, predictable slow, carrying the weight of family expectation. But beneath the surface, something was shifting. I could feel it in the quiet between Mr. Lowell's sentences, like a curtain waiting to be drawn. The fireplace crackled once, then went still burning, but quiet, like the rest of us. It had been about 40 minutes since the reading began, and still no one addressed what the remainder actually meant. No one asked. That was the part that told me everything. They didn't think it mattered. Melissa was texting under the table now, smirking at something. Probably a meme or a message from her fiancé Thomas. He hadn't come. He said work emergency, but I knew it was because Melissa told him not to waste time on the boring parts. She never liked funerals, or Grandpa. I stared at the glass of water in front of me. The condensation was sliding slowly down, pooling on the coaster, which had a tiny chip in the corner. I pressed my finger into that chip without realizing. Something about it felt steady, flawed, but grounded. I didn't speak the entire time. Mr. Lowell's voice wove its way through the final sections of the will, occasionally interrupted by a cough or the squeak of a leather shoe shifting against polished floor. Then the papers were stacked, folded. "That concludes the reading," he said. "Any questions can be brought to my office after today." I heard a chair scrape, a rustle of clothes. People started to gather their things like it was the end of a PTA meeting, not the moment they all just decided what Grandpa's life was worth in objects. Someone said drinks at Linda's after, and a few people nodded, as if grief could be boxed up and followed with champagne. I stood slowly. No one stopped me, no one spoke to me. Mom avoided eye contact. She adjusted her blazer, whispered something about needing to call the florist again. Melissa leaned down, picked up her purse, and on her way past me said, "You should have worn navy. Black washes you out." I smiled. Quiet. Not cold, just quiet. When I turned to walk away, I heard a soft voice from behind Ms. Carter. It was Mr. Lowell, still seated, still calm. "Yes," I replied. "There's one more envelope. Your grandfather left instructions. Privately." The air changed again, not for the room, just for me. I nodded. Of course. He gestured toward the side room. I followed without looking back. Inside was smaller, warmer, fewer windows, no portraits. Just a desk, 2 chairs, and a small lamp with a golden pull chain. He sat. I sat. From his briefcase he removed a slim envelope. The paper looked aged, but the handwriting was unmistakable. "Emily." He slid it across to me without a word. I didn't open it right away. Just placed both palms on the table, feeling the grain of the wood. My breath came steady. This was the moment I hadn't realized I was waiting for. "I haven't read it," Mr. Lowell said. He was very clear. "Only you." I gave him a small nod. Appreciative. I broke the seal. Inside was one sheet, folded 3 times. The handwriting sloped slightly firm and deliberate. "Emily, they will never understand the work you did to become who you are. That's okay. You don't owe them visibility, only truth. The remainder is not what they think. It never was. Ask Henry about the trust." I looked up. Mr. Lowell was already reaching for a second document from his case. This one had red tape and a wax seal. He placed it on the table between us like a quiet offering. "This is the trust," he said. My voice was steady. "They think I got nothing. They're mistaken." He didn't smile, didn't look proud, just respectful. I didn't touch the document yet. My fingers stayed where they were, still on the table, still calm. Behind the closed door, I could hear the others laughing faintly like wind chimes out of tune. I wasn't angry. That surprised me. Mostly I felt still, like a lake right before a storm knows it's coming, but chooses to be calm anyway. Because storms pass, but lakes remain, and I, Emily Carter, was not leaving the way I entered. Not today. When I stepped back into the main room, no one noticed. Or maybe they did, and pretended not to. The chairs had shifted. People were standing now, clustering around the sideboard, where someone had set out coffee and tea. Melissa was laughing with Aunt Linda about some story from high school. My mother stood near the fireplace, her arms folded tightly, her mouth set in that neutral line she always wore when pretending not to judge. I didn't interrupt. I walked quietly to the coat rack, lifted my black wool coat, and slipped it on, slowly smoothing the fabric at the sleeves. No one asked me where I'd gone. No one asked if I was okay, and I didn't offer a word. From behind me, I could hear Melissa say, it was kind of awkward for her to be here anyway. Grandpa barely mentioned her. Another voice added, "She didn't even cry." They didn't know. Of course they didn't. They thought emotion lived in spectacle. But grief, real grief, doesn't shout. It stays behind after the room empties. I turned, slightly caught a glimpse of my reflection in the darkened window. My posture was straight, my expression even. I looked finally like someone who didn't need permission to exist. Mr. Lowell stepped into the room behind me quietly. He didn't say anything to them. just placed a single manila envelope on the mantel, then left. I followed a few steps behind. As the door clicked shut behind me, I heard nothing, no questions, no footsteps, no sudden realization. Just the sound of my own boots against the walkway. But I knew that envelope would change everything. They'd open it eventually. And inside they'd see the clause Grandpa added in his own hand, the one that redirected the True Estate Stock's assets, the house in Vermont, into the trust. A trust created not for appearances, but for impact. And the name on it was mine. Not because I demanded it, but because I earned it quietly over years of phone calls, hospital visits, handwritten letters, and Sunday afternoons no one else made time for. And now I didn't need to say a word. The wind picked up slightly as I reached my car. Leaves skittered along the pavement, brittle and loud. I opened the door, sat, and for a moment just stared ahead. Then I smiled. Soft, small, and drove away, leaving behind the only thing that had ever truly kept me invisible: their expectations. It was the kind of gray morning that made everything feel slightly damp, light filtered through the overcast sky in a way that flattened colors and dulled sound. I arrived early to the will reading. Too early, actually. I stood outside the Carter & Carter law office, the plaque on the brick wall still shining from last week's rain. I remembered the last time I'd been here, Grandpa had brought me along when he updated his power of attorney. Back then, the receptionist had offered me tea. Today, she barely looked up. Inside, I took a seat by the window. The leather chairs were stiff and cold. I folded my hands in my lap and waited. Melissa arrived next. Late, of course, in a cloud of expensive perfume and heels that announced her with every step. She didn't glance at me, but leaned over to kiss Uncle Richard's cheek, laughing as she said, "Sorry, traffic on 405 is just insane this morning." She wore navy, sharp, confident, deliberate. Her makeup was perfect, like she was walking into a board meeting instead of our grandfather's will reading. Mom followed soon after, her arm looped with Aunt Linda's. She surveyed the room quickly, her eyes skating over me like I was another chair. "We'll sit here," she told Linda, as if I wasn't occupying the seat beside them. I shifted slightly, creating space. Melissa threw me a tight smile, barely there. "Did you bring anything?" she asked casually. I blinked. "Anything, a thank you card, maybe? Grandpa always said you were sentimental." Her voice was syrupy sweet. I didn't respond, just returned her gaze steady and unbothered. She shrugged and turned away, muttering something to Aunt Linda that made her chuckle. The lawyer, Mr. Henry Lowell, entered with a folder under one arm. He nodded politely, then set his briefcase down and began organizing papers. His voice when he spoke was measured, almost gentle. "Thank you all for coming. We're here to review the final will and distribution of assets for Mr. Franklin Carter." A hush settled. Melissa crossed her legs tightly, her phone face down on her lap. Mom straightened her blouse. "As you know," Mr. Lowell continued, "Mr. Carter updated his will 2 months before his passing. This version reflects his most recent wishes." Melissa's eyes flicked toward me briefly, just a flicker. The reading began. It was all standard at first: donations to a local veterans foundation, a scholarship fund at his alma mater. Then came the personal items. To Melissa Carter, Mr. Lowell read the antique brooch from my late wife's collection and $20,000 in cash. Melissa beamed. To Richard Carter, he continued my tools and workshop items to be used for teaching as we once discussed. Uncle Richard nodded solemnly. To Karen Carter, my daughter, the 1967 Mustang, and $50,000 in appreciation for her care during my final months. My mother's chin rose slightly, and to Emily Carter he said next. The room shifted, subtle but palpable. To Emily, he said, "Goes the music box from my childhood home," and... A pause. Melissa chuckled under her breath. "And $1. The silence was instant and sharp. Mom looked at me finally, but only to see how I would react. I didn't flinch. I kept my gaze on the box in Mr. Lowell's hands. Melissa laughed outright. $1, she said. "That's almost cruel." Mr. Lowell said nothing, and I didn't speak. I didn't ask. I didn't move. Instead, I nodded once and looked away from all of them. The moment dissolved into awkward laughter from Melissa, but no one joined her. Aunt Linda looked confused. Uncle Richard tapped his knee softly, clearly uncomfortable. And Mom. She crossed her arms and glanced at Mr. Lowell as if demanding an explanation, but none came. Mr. Lowell simply cleared his throat and said, "Let's continue." What followed was a list of minor bequests to old friends, to charities, to a neighbor who once helped Grandpa fix his roof. It was generous, thoughtful, and yet the room remained fixated on that single line, "To Emily Carter, $1." I could feel it buzzing under the surface, the unspoken questions, the judgments, but I didn't meet their eyes. I kept mine on the window. Outside, the wind rustled a tree just enough to catch my attention. It was easier to focus on that than on their smirks. Melissa leaned toward Mom and whispered, "Not low enough. Guess she finally saw where she stands." Mom didn't hush her. No one did. When the reading ended, Mr. Lowell began gathering his papers. A few family members stood stretching their legs, but most lingered their curiosity, not quite satisfied. I stayed seated. And that's when the whispering began. "Karen, that's my mother," walked over. Her voice was low, controlled. "Emily, I hope you understand this wasn't personal. Dad, he had his reasons." I looked up at her steady. "Did he tell you what they were?" Her lips tightened. "He was old, confused maybe." I nodded once. "Maybe." She stepped back, unsettled by how calm I was. Melissa approached next, arms folded. "You always were dramatic," she said. "You'll probably make some big show of leaving, right? Maybe slam a door." I smiled. "I haven't said a word." She blinked. That got her. Aunt Linda tried to smooth things over. "Well, dear, I'm sure it's all just a misunderstanding. You were always such a quiet girl. Quiet." That word again. It followed me like a shadow. In school, at home, even here. Quiet. But quiet isn't weak. Quiet remembers. Quiet listens. When I finally stood, my legs felt steady. I tucked my hands into my coat pockets and gave Mr. Lowell a polite nod. "I'll be going now," I said. Melissa scoffed. "Nothing left for you here anyway." I paused at the door, not turning around. "We'll see." And then I walked out. The air hit me like a reset button, cool, crisp, bracing. I didn't rush to my car. I just stood there on the sidewalk, letting the world move around me. Behind me, I heard the door open. Footsteps. A man's. Mr. Lowell. "Emily," he said gently. I turned. "There's something else," he said, glancing back at the door as if to make sure no one followed. I said nothing, just waited. "Your grandfather left a separate letter. Not part of the will, just something he wanted you to have." He handed me a small sealed envelope. My name was written in his handwriting, elegant, careful. I didn't open it right away. "Thank you," I said. He looked like he wanted to say more, but instead he nodded and returned inside. I stood on the sidewalk, the envelope warm in my hand. I didn't need to read it to know what it meant. He hadn't forgotten me. He hadn't left me out. He'd just saved the real message for last. I slipped the letter into my purse and sat behind the wheel of my car, hands resting quietly on the steering wheel. I didn't start the engine right away. My eyes lingered on the reflection in the rearview mirror, just my own face, steady, unreadable. The door to the lawyer's office opened again. A group emerged, Melissa, Mom, and a few cousins. Their laughter was louder now, not forced, but rehearsed. Melissa had always been good at redirecting attention. The moment things got uncomfortable, she'd throw out a joke, flash, a smile, and move the spotlight. I watched them through the windshield. Mom didn't look my way. Melissa glanced toward my car but kept walking. I waited until they all got into their cars and drove off one by one before I started mine. That night I sat at my dining table with a cup of tea and the letter. The envelope had a soft texture like stationery from another time. I opened it carefully. Inside was a single page. "Dearest Emily, they think I forgot you. Let them. Some things aren't meant to be paraded in front of others. But you and I, we've always known where the real strength lies. There's more than just what was read today. Mr. Lowell will explain when the time is right. I trust you'll know what to do. Love, Grandpa." I read the letter twice, then again. Not because I didn't understand it, but because every word felt like a quiet restoration of something I'd buried for years. The next morning, Mr. Lowell called. His tone was professional but warmer than before. "Emily," he said, "I have something to show you. Privately. If you're free tomorrow, I can meet you here." "What is it?" I asked, though I already sensed the answer. He paused. "It's what your grandfather didn't want the others to hear." I agreed. When I arrived the next day, the office was quiet, the reception desk unmanned. Mr. Lowell led me to the same room, now empty. On the table was a folder. Inside, documents, deeds, account information. "He created a private trust in your name," Mr. Lowell said. "He didn't want it mentioned publicly. Said it wasn't about proving anything to them, just making sure you were seen, in the way that mattered." I didn't cry, I didn't speak. I just sat there letting the truth settle like dust on old wood, slow, quiet, undeniable. As I left the office, I noticed a familiar car parked across the street. Melissa. She was inside watching. I didn't wave, didn't smile. I simply walked to my car, opened the door, and paused long enough for her to see the envelope in my hand. Not a show, just a presence, a stillness. And then I got in, closed the door softly, and drove away. Thanksgiving came colder than usual that year. The air had a sharpness to it, the kind that made your breath visible and your steps sound louder than they should. Melissa had invited everyone for dinner at her place, a sleek new townhouse she and her husband had moved into just that summer. It was meant to be a celebration of family, of traditions. But the guest list told another story. I wasn't supposed to be there. At least that's what I gathered from the group texts I was never included in and the photos posted days before with captions like "Everyone's coming underneath a table setting for 10, none of which included my name. But Mr. Lowell had called again 2 days prior. "There's something else your grandfather wanted read," he said. He asked me to wait until Thanksgiving. I didn't question why. I just said yes. And now, here I was standing outside Melissa's front door, holding a slim brown envelope and a wrapped pie I baked myself. The door opened after 3 knocks. Mom stood there, her eyes blinking twice in surprise before defaulting into a smile that didn't reach her cheeks. "Oh, Emily, we weren't expecting you. I'm here for Grandpa's final request," I said calmly, holding up the envelope like it was just a recipe I needed her to glance at. She stepped aside slowly. The warmth inside didn't reach me as I walked past the entryway where coats hung in neat symmetry and the hallway smelled of cinnamon and garlic. In the living room, voices softened as I entered. Melissa froze mid-sentence. Aunt Diana's eyes darted between me and the envelope. Uncle Raymond cleared his throat, but didn't speak. Melissa stepped forward, the perfect hostess, with a tone that tried too hard to sound untouched. "Emily, this is unexpected." I nodded once. "I won't stay long. Mr. Lowell sent me. Grandpa wanted something read today." Her smile wavered. "I'm not sure this is the right time," she said. "Everyone's just about to sit." But then Mr. Lowell entered from the kitchen hallway. He wasn't supposed to be here either. The room went silent as he walked to my side. "Mr. Lowell, Melissa," said her voice tightening. "I didn't know your grandfather wanted this shared today," he said, then looked directly at me. With Emily present. No one sat down, no one moved. He opened the envelope slowly, took out a second letter. This wasn't included in the formal reading, he said. It was handwritten and sealed with private instructions. He glanced around the room. "It concerns the family trust." A pulse seemed to go through the room like everyone inhaled at the same time. He began reading. "To my family, those who stayed close and those who were kept away." The letter was short, simple, and precise. It named Emily as the sole beneficiary of a private fund he had been building quietly over decades. It wasn't just money. It was stockland, and the deed to the old family cabin that had been Melissa's favorite place as a child. Gasps scattered like wind-blown leaves. Melissa took a step forward. "That's not possible. That cabin was always..." Mr. Lowell didn't flinch. "The deed was transferred last year. Quietly. As per his wishes." I didn't move, didn't speak. Melissa turned to me. "You knew." I just looked at her. Not angry, not smug, just present. "I baked a pie," I said softly, holding it out. "You can still have it if you want." No one took it. The silence was the kind that rang. I placed the pie on the side table beside a stack of untouched paper napkins and a vase of dried flowers. My fingers brushed the tablecloth, a soft linen with gold stitching, probably imported, and I remembered how Grandma used to fold her napkins like birds. Melissa never bothered to learn. Everyone stood frozen like a still-life painting waiting to be disrupted. The only movement came from Dad, who shifted uncomfortably near the fireplace, eyes avoiding mine. He didn't say anything. He never did. Mom's lips parted, but no words came out. Mr. Lowell closed the letter, folding it back into its envelope with the same care one might reserve for a will, a truth, a verdict. "She didn't even visit him," Melissa said finally, voice sharp like cracked porcelain. "How could he?" "I wrote him," I said. "Every week." Her mouth snapped shut. Mr. Lowell nodded. "Your grandfather didn't want applause. He wanted presence." Emily showed up in the ways that mattered to him. Aunt Diana looked down at her shoes. Uncle Raymond crossed his arms but didn't speak. Melissa's husband, Ethan, cleared his throat, but stopped when her eyes flicked toward him. I turned to Mom. "Did he ever talk about me?" I asked. After I moved out, her mouth opened, then closed. I nodded, accepting the silence like an old friend. I used to think if I stayed quiet long enough, someone would fill the silence with something kind. I glanced around the room, but all I heard was everyone getting used to me not being there. The words weren't angry. They weren't even sad. They just were. Melissa stepped forward again, softer now. "Why didn't you tell us he was writing you? Would it have changed anything?" I asked, genuinely curious. She said nothing. From the hallway, I heard the sound of my niece, a toddler now, laughing in the kitchen with someone, a light sound untethered from the weight in the room. I looked toward it, letting the sound settle the air. Mr. Lowell walked to the door. "I'll leave you all to process," he said quietly. Then he turned to me. "Emily, your grandfather asked one last thing. He wanted you to see the cabin again. Said it would feel different now." I gave a small smile. "I think he's right." As Mr. Lowell stepped outside, I looked back at the people in the room. They weren't villains, just people with choices, some better than others. Melissa finally spoke, but her voice was smaller now. "Emily, why didn't you ever push back?" I paused for a long moment. "Because I wasn't waiting to be invited," I said. "I was learning how to walk through doors that were already mine." Aunt Diana looked up at that. Even Ethan seemed to shift as though something had landed. But I didn't stay long enough to see if it stuck. I turned, walked to the front door, and picked up my coat. As I opened it, a gust of cold air slipped in, rustling the garlands Melissa had hung along the hallway. Behind me, no one moved. I didn't need them to. I stepped out onto the porch, the wooden boards creaking beneath my feet, and pulled the door gently closed behind me. I didn't slam it. I didn't look back. The latch clicked into place with a soft finality that echoed louder than any goodbye ever could. The winter air was sharp but clean. It stung my cheeks just enough to remind me I was alive here now and no longer invisible. I stood for a moment on the steps, letting the quiet settle. Inside, they would still be frozen, caught in that silence where old certainties unravel. And I wasn't part of it anymore. I didn't need to be. The gravel crunched beneath my boots as I walked toward my car. The sun had started to set, casting long shadows across the snow-dusted lawn. I passed the rose bushes Mom kept trimmed, though they'd withered in the cold. Even then, she kept them neat appearance over essence always. I paused at the car, placing my hand on the door. Then I looked back, not at the house but at the window. I could see vague silhouettes inside. Someone had drawn the curtain aside slightly, just enough to watch. They always watched after. I didn't wave. Instead, I opened the door, slid inside, and let the warmth of the heater hum to life. My fingers hovered over the ignition, but I didn't start the engine right away. I pulled my phone from my coat pocket and opened the last message Grandpa had sent me. It was short, just 3 words. "You stayed true." He'd sent it last fall after I mailed him a photo of the cabin I'd fixed up, the one he'd taken me to every summer, before they decided Melissa was the more appropriate one for family things. I never told them I'd kept going back. fixing things, restoring what they'd abandoned. I glanced at the road ahead. The sky was a deepening violet now, and the lights from neighboring houses had begun to flicker on. Families gathering, conversations echoing off walls. I didn't envy them anymore. I had something better, peace that hadn't been given to me, but earned. Inside they would argue. Or not. Maybe they'd pretend everything was still in order. But a shift had happened. Something had been seen, heard, even if not admitted aloud. That was enough. I tucked the phone away and started the car. As the wheels crunched slowly over the gravel, I didn't rush. No one was waiting for me, and for once, that felt like freedom. I passed the mailbox at the end of the drive, noticing a small package inside, probably something left over from the holiday delivery rush. I stopped, stepped out, and retrieved it. It was addressed to me, handwritten, no return address. I opened it slowly, right there on the side of the road. Inside was a small wooden carving of a mountain cabin, intricate, polished, clearly hand-whittled. Underneath, a note in familiar handwriting: "You always saw the value in what others ignored. Don't stop." I held the carving in my hand, feeling the grooves worn by care and intention. A quiet laugh escaped my lips. Grandpa had planned this. Of course he had. I got back in the car and placed the carving on the dashboard. The sun had dipped just below the horizon, now casting everything in a soft blue haze. As I drove off, I didn't look back. Not at the house, not at the people in it. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is walk away without needing to explain. No speeches, no revenge, just a silent truth left behind. And it was enough. Some truths don't need an audience. Some victories don't need applause. And sometimes the quietest step away echoes longer than any door slammed shut. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't ask for space. She simply became someone they could no longer ignore.